Hey everyone, so this is my discussion for seeking equity in online virtual education. So before we start, I think it's important to explain just what is equity and how that differs from equality. According to Harris and Wood, equity is essentially enacting intentional strategies to address disparities that impact students experiencing disproportionate impact, to remediate disparities in their experiences and outcomes. So what this means is we need to recognize that people come from certain backgrounds that really put them at a disadvantage, be it in school, work, or society. Then by recognizing it, you put into practice certain strategies that will help give them a boost to sort of catch up to the people who are, in a sense, doing fine without the needed help. A student's experiences and backgrounds is a huge indicator of their success. Typically, those students from upper class, typically white backgrounds, have the advantage of not having to worry about the environment or having what they need to succeed. Equity is different from equality because equality is about fairness, giving everyone the same. However, as you can see in this picture, giving everyone the same thing isn't really helping these certain groups. Some people need it more than others, while some don't really need it at all. This goes into Harris and Wood's talk about equity-mindedness. As teachers, to best support our students who are facing disproportionate disparities and aren't doing so well in our class, we need to have this equity mindset. What this means is that we need to recognize that often systemic inequities disadvantage minoritized people. Because of this, we need to think that maybe a student in our class is underperforming not because of it's who they are and that their people are low achievers, but because the institution is failing them in providing help. We also need to be critically reflecting of ourselves and how we are doing as teachers to make sure our lessons can reach out to all our students. Wood and Harris also emphasized a lot that we need to be race conscious. We need to recognize that we have students that the system tends to be against, so we should acknowledge that their backgrounds and experiences, and we need to open up more serious conversations and to provide them more help. So the big ideas I pulled from this talk is that, one, COVID highlights the racial inequities amongst students and has exacerbated the academic success gap through online learning. So the achievement gap, I think it has always been there, but with online learning, it really highlights the class differences amongst students. Harris and Wood have said multiple times that certain conditions like implicit bias or unequal teaching practices are more prevalent now than ever. Aside from the pandemic, students are facing issues of invisibility, accessibility, and external pressures, which I will talk about later. And three, to combat challenges students face, we need to employ equity-minded practices. So the three challenges that I mentioned students of color are facing that was in Harris' highlight are invisibility, accessibility, and external problems. Bishop's offers a windows and mirrors metaphor to highlight how students of color are not really represented in the material they read. Bishop states that when children cannot find themselves reflected in the books they read, or when the images they see are distorted, negative, or laughable, they learn a powerful lesson about how they are devalued in the society of which they are part of. I think online learning has really simplified content and really does not capture or represent the backgrounds of students of color. There's also issues of accessibility. What happens if a student does not have access to a computer with a mic or camera or good Wi-Fi? What if a student can't go to the library or a place that has good Wi-Fi? Online learning has really raised these questions of access and highlights the struggles of students from lower income backgrounds. Finally, there are external problems that students face other than school. I like to use the phrase that school is not a bubble, independent of outside problems. How can students focus on school if they have to worry about their home life? or where are they going to get their next paycheck from, or internal family issues that they cannot physically escape from now. With these in mind, Woods and Harris proposed 5 equity practices I think really center around these 3 ideas: intentional lesson planning with students in mind, being proactive, and going back to being race conscious. We cannot change the backgrounds our students come from, but we can certainly take the initiative to be aware of where they could be coming from and reaching out to them rather than waiting for them to come to us. So these practices are: 1, be intrusive, which relates to being proactive, really reaching out to students and clearly laying out how to succeed in your class. 2, be relational, so try to humanize yourself and connecting students with students through their interests. One of the quotes I liked from the webinar was, if you're not being intentional about being relevant, then you're being intentional about being irrelevant. Finally, the last 3 are being culturally relevant and affirming, be community focused, and be race conscious again. It's important to recognize the different backgrounds students come from and make these backgrounds relevant to the lesson. Students are more engaged when they can relate to the material, and it's important to share perspectives and push for collaborative learning. Also, to recognize that this is the life and experiences of the students we serve. We should engage in racial and equity issues because it's simply something that we cannot ignore. Finally, some larger implications. If we're trying to close the achievement gap, I think we should start these equity practices at the K-12 level. No matter what grade, we need to keep in mind that our classes are made up of students from all sorts of backgrounds, and these kids will need different attentions. We need to find that balance as teachers of being fair, but also tending to the needs of our students, because even from a young age, these kids are already facing systemic inequalities. And even outside of school, it's important to keep with this race-conscious dialogue. There have been several studies that show it's never too early to talk about racial issues, and it's important to facilitate these discussions. People want to believe we have entered a colorblind society, but I think with everything going on with the police protests and everything that's happened in the last few years, it shows that we have not achieved an end to racism. In fact, I'd say it's more prevalent now than ever. We don't need to be colorblind, we need to be race conscious and acknowledge people of color's experiences and the external problems they face. Because, as Wood and Harris says, without the lens of equity, you have the lens of oppression. So, thank you, and that's it.